So, I want to ask you a somewhat uncomfortable question right off the bat today.
Oh, jumping right in.
Yeah, no sugarcoating it. I want you to think about the way you move through the world. You probably consider yourself, a kind person, you're generous, you accommodate the people you care about when they're struggling, right?
Right, which is what we're all taught to do.
Exactly. When things get tough for a friend or a family member, you step up. But what if those exact virtues, like the things you completely pride yourself on, the things society praises you for, are actually feeding a destructive force in someone you love?
Man, it completely messes with our fundamental definition of what it means to be a good person.
It really does.
Because, we are so conditioned to believe that helping is always good
Right.
and giving is always virtuous. To even suggest that your generosity might be weaponized against the very person you're trying to help, that requires a total overhaul of how we view relationships.
And that total overhaul is exactly what we are focusing on for today's deep dive. We are looking at this really profound piece of writing. It's titled Demons Are Fed by False Kindness and False Generosity.
Such a striking title.
It is. And our mission today is to, well, redefine what a demon actually is in this context. We want to break down the incredibly uncomfortable difference between helping someone heal and enabling their destruction.
Yeah.
And most importantly, we want to give you the tools to evaluate your own acts of generosity. Okay, let's unpack this because this source material completely flips the conventional wisdom of just be nice right on its head.
It really does. And to even begin unpacking this, we have to establish what this text actually means when it uses the word demon, because I know that word carries a lot of baggage.
Oh, absolutely. People hear demon and think like horror movies.
Right, exactly. But
Yeah.
the framework here throws out all the theological baggage. We aren't talking about a literal monster hiding under the bed.
No pitchforks.
No pitchfork-wielding entities, no possessions. Far from it. In this psychological framework, a demon is defined as a fixed, distorted pattern within a person.
Okay, so like a habit.
Deeper than a habit. Think of it as a calcified wound. It's an emotional injury or a coping mechanism that has been around for so long that it has actually developed its own logic, its own appetite, even its own gravitational pull.
Wow. And the source gives some incredibly recognizable examples of this, which makes it hit so close to home. It's talking about things like addiction.
Yeah.
It's talking about narcissistic entitlement. It's that inner bully someone has that only gets louder and more aggressive the more you try to appease it.
Or consider the victim mentality, right?
Yeah.
That deep, just bottomless well of self-pity that somehow expands the more you coddle it.
Yeah, that is so common.
Or the rage that just grows larger the more people walk on eggshells around it. Those patterns, those are the demons.
Yeah.
And they operate completely mechanically.
Mean what, exactly?
Yeah. Meaning they grow for one specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
They are totally insulated from the natural friction of reality. They persist because they are not met with a necessary counterforce. When people accommodate the pattern just reads that as confirmation to continue.
That makes so much sense. It's like, okay, imagine continuously giving sugar to someone with a severe cavity just because they're crying for something sweet.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like you think you're easing their pain in the moment, you're giving them what they're begging for, but you're actually rotting the tooth faster.
Exactly. You're feeding the decay.
So if it's so destructive, why is our human instinct almost always to hand over the sugar? Like, why do we do it?
Well, our instinct to accommodate is rarely as selfless as we tell ourselves it is.
Ouch.
I know, right? The text dives deeply into the anatomy of what it calls false kindness and false generosity. And false kindness treats someone with warmth at the absolute expense of their growth or their accountability.
So we're prioritizing warmth over truth.
Exactly. And if we look under the hood, it is driven by largely unconscious, totally self-serving motivations.
And the breakdown of these motivations is honestly tough to read because it is just so painfully relatable. Like, the first one is the givers need to be perceived as good.
Yes.
Meaning, the kind act isn't actually about the other person at all. It's a form of self-protection.
Because if I am kind to you, you won't be angry with me. It manages the tension in the room.
It's basically conflict avoidance.
Totally. Another major driver is just the simple, visceral fear of conflict. We don't want to rock the boat. Like a friend pitches a completely delusional business plan that is going to bankrupt them, and we affirm it just to avoid an argument.
Or a parent refusing to set a basic boundary because they desperately want their teenager to like them.
Yes, they avoid the immediate confrontation by feeding the exact behavioral pattern that requires confrontation to change.
Now, I want to pause here because I want to push back on something the source calls spiritual bypassing, which it notes is a particularly dangerous modern
It
distortion.
really is.
Because I've always thought that being a highly evolved, spiritual, or emotionally mature person meant you were supposed to be a peacemaker. Like unconditional love means perpetual comfort, never introducing friction. How is that a distortion?
So that is the core illusion of spiritual bypassing. It mistakes the warm, fuzzy texture of love for the totality of love.
Ah, I see.
It assumes that if an interaction feels uncomfortable or if there's tension, it must be unloving. But peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth.
Wow.
Yeah. So when someone uses spirituality or, excessive compassion as an excuse to never hold someone accountable, they're dodging the heavy lifting of real intimacy. They're wearing a mask of compassion to hide their own codependence.
Because the person who gives endlessly, the one who just cannot say no, they usually believe they're a martyr. They think they are giving everything to the other person,
Right. But what they're actually doing is avoiding the discomfort of the other person's discomfort.
which is huge.
It is. Watching someone you love struggle or face consequences or be angry with you, it's agonizing. False kindness is just a painkiller for the giver's anxiety.
Yeah.
It serves the giver and it abandons the receiver to their dysfunction.
Which bleeds perfectly into the concept of false generosity, because the text defines this as giving, whether that's like time, money, emotional bandwidth, without discernment and without integrity.
Because true generosity demands a brutal assessment.
Yeah.
What does this person genuinely need for their highest good? False generosity ignores that question entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it says false generosity gives to purchase peace.
Purchasing peace, exactly.
Let's make that concrete for a second. Say you have a 35-year-old sibling who refuses to hold down a job and they constantly ask for rent money.
A very common scenario.
Right. You aren't giving them $500 out of the goodness of your heart. You're paying $500 so you don't have to have a screaming match on Thanksgiving, or so you don't have to sit with the crushing guilt of knowing they might get evicted.
And that guilt is incredibly powerful. We often give just to soothe our own distress when we witness someone suffering, even if our giving is actually prolonging the root problem.
Yeah.
We also see false generosity springing from a place of profound scarcity. There are people who are absolutely terrified of their own needs. They feel they have no right to take up space or have boundaries.
So they overcompensate.
Exactly. Since they can't tolerate receiving, they compulsively overgive to structure their entire identity around being the indispensable helper.
It's generosity as an insurance policy against abandonment. Like, if I give you everything, if you literally rely on me to survive, you can never leave me.
That is the ultimate defense strategy disguised as virtue.
I am struggling with the emotional reality of this, though. Let's stick with the sibling who needs rent money. If my sibling is completely broke, maybe because of a string of terrible choices, and I refuse to pay their rent, society calls me a cold, heartless person.
Oh, absolutely.
The family calls me selfish. And, like, my sibling might actually end up on the street. How is anyone supposed to stomach that level of guilt? How do you know when you've crossed the line from being a good, supportive friend or sibling to just purchasing peace?
What's fascinating here is that the distinction lies entirely in the difference between providing fuel and providing medicine.
Fuel versus medicine? Okay.
Yeah. False giving is ultimately a flight from witnessing truth. When you cross the line into enabling, you are no longer providing resources that act as medicine for the person's essential soul.
You're just feeding the demon.
You are shoveling unlimited resources into the furnace of their destructive pattern. If your money, your time, or your silence allows that sibling to completely avoid facing the natural consequences of their actions, you are no longer helping them survive. You are funding their sickness.
Funding their sickness. Man, that is a sharp, harsh reality. And what is wild is that this isn't just some modern pop psychology fad, right?
Not at all.
The text traces this exact psychological trap across multiple ancient spiritual traditions. These are cultures that never even interacted with one another, and they all identify this exact same human flaw.
The historical consensus is honestly staggering. Take Tibetan Buddhism, for example.
Okay.
They describe a psychological state known as the realm of the hungry ghosts, or pretas. And these beings are depicted very vividly. They have enormous distended bellies, massive mouths, but tiny needle-thin throats.
So they can never get enough.
Exactly.
Right.
They're driven by an insatiable appetite,
Mhm.
but they can never consume enough to be satisfied. The food literally burns them as it goes down.
And the crucial point the text makes is that in the Tibetan tradition, compassion does not mean finding a way to force more food into the hungry ghosts.
Right. Serving a hungry ghost doesn't cure its hunger, it just exhausts the server.
Hmm.
True compassion in that tradition requires the wisdom and discernment to see that the entity doesn't need more food. It needs to be liberated from the state of hunger itself.
Then there is Yoruba cosmology, specifically the figure of Isu. I found this part fascinating because Isu is often mistranslated in Western contexts as a trickster god.
Or even a devil figure sometimes, yeah.
Right. But the text frames Isu as the fundamental principle of the crossroads and of consequence. Isu is reality stripped of all pretense.
Isu represents the cosmic refusal of false kindness. Like if you step off a cliff, gravity does not soften the blow just because you had good intentions,
Oh.
or because you were feeling sad that day.
Gravity doesn't care.
Gravity is perfectly accurate. Isu operates the exact same way. He ensures that your actions meet their true consequence because reality simply does not accommodate delusion. Isu forces the pattern to face the friction it has been avoiding.
I see the same thread in the Hindu concept of dharma and ahimsa. Ahimsa translates to non-harm, but in the West, people think that means being a human doormat, right? Never raising your voice, never causing offense, just pure passivity.
Which is a complete flattening of a deeply complex philosophy. The deeper understanding of non-harm recognizes that sometimes the most violent, harmful act imaginable is allowing someone to remain comfortable in a destructive lie.
Wow.
Consider a spiritual teacher and a student. If the teacher sees the student hiding behind a comfortable delusion, and the teacher withholds a harsh truth because they don't want to upset the student, that teacher is actually committing harm. They are violating ahimsa.
Because delivering that truth would cause a psychological breakdown of the student's ego, and that breakdown is exactly what the student needs to actually grow.
The ego's destruction is a requirement for liberation. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see this mirrored perfectly in Sufism and Christian mysticism.
Right, the text mentions fauna.
Yes. In the Sufi tradition of fauna, which is the annihilation of the ego, the sheikh does not rush in to overcomfort the student who is weeping in existential terror.
They don't give them a tissue and say, there.
No, the sheikh leaves them in that burning discomfort. Real spiritual transmission requires the student to be abandoned to the fire.
And the Christian desert fathers, like Abba Moses, advised monks to stay in your cell.
Yeah.
Like, don't flee into anxious, socially softening behaviors. Don't go seeking out other monks to chat and soften the blow when you feel internal despair. You have to sit with the horror of yourself.
Across all of human history, true love and genuine spiritual transformation have never been frictionless. They require brutal honesty and a steadfast refusal to validate someone's avoidance of reality.
So what does this all mean for us? Like, if the entire ancient world agrees we're doing this wrong by endlessly accommodating people, what does doing it right actually look like on a random Tuesday?
Good question.
Because telling someone no when they're crying in front of you, it goes against every instinct in the human body. How do we practice true kindness without turning into cold, unfeeling walls?
It starts by completely redefining what true kindness actually is.
Right.
True kindness is rooted firmly in the ultimate good of the other person, not in the comfort of the current moment. Yes, sometimes that looks like warmth, a hug, and financial support, but sometimes it looks like an absolute brick wall. The defining characteristic of true kindness is that it is completely indifferent to being perceived as kind.
Indifferent to being perceived as kind. That is so hard.
It is. It says, I see your reality clearly, and I will not pretend I don't see the destruction just to make this afternoon easier for both of us.
And true generosity flows from a place of fullness. It isn't frantic, it's guided by wisdom, and it is fully capable of saying no from a place of absolute clarity, rather than a place of resentment or scarcity.
Exactly.
The source material lays out a 7-step framework to help navigate this, and what strikes me isn't so much the checklist itself, but the fundamental shift in how your body actually feels when you interact with people.
The somatic experience is everything here. That's step one. One of the most vital steps is learning to physically feel the difference between guilt-driven giving and truth-driven giving.
Guilt-driven giving feels terrible.
It has a frantic, tight urgency to it in your chest. You just want to hand over the money or offer the apology or fix the problem instantly so your own internal panic stops. Truth-driven giving is much slower, It's grounded. It carries far less emotional
So
charge.
you have to learn to pause in the face of someone's crisis and locate your actual motivation before you open your mouth.
Right. Which leads to step 2. Name the demon internally. Recognize exactly what you were feeding.
And step 3 is crucial. The text says we have to discern between feeling the demon and serving the person's essential soul beneath the wound.
This raises an important question, though. You have to ask yourself, am I being kind to this person, or am I being kind to their distorted pattern?
Great. And then we get to step 4, which might be the hardest one, building the capacity to be present with someone else's discomfort without resolving it for them. You have to develop a tolerance for witnessing struggle.
Because if you lack that tolerance, you will inevitably revert to false kindness, just to medicate your own anxiety. You have to be able to sit next to someone who is in pain, or someone who is furious with you for setting a boundary, and not abandon your position just to make the heavy air in the room go away.
Which brings up step 5, recognizing that firm limits are a spiritual act. When you stop feeding a destructive pattern, you create a gap. You force the pattern to finally encounter itself.
Yes.
It makes me think of an analogy. Imagine a wildlife rescue that brings in an injured bird. They hand feed it for weeks to keep it alive, but eventually they have to stop.
We have to.
Yeah, they have to put the food further away or release it into a controlled enclosure and watch it fail to catch prey a few times. They don't stop hand feeding it because they suddenly hate the bird or because they are cruel. They stop because they need the bird to remember how to fly and survive on its own. The limit is the only thing that creates the space for independence.
I love that analogy. And as you establish those limits, step 6 demands that you turn the microscope on yourself. You have to examine your own demonic patterns.
Turning it around.
Yeah. Why do you have such a desperate, clawing need to be this savior? What is this false giving feeding inside of your own ego? Is it the demon of conflict avoidance? Is it the demon of performing goodness so no one can ever criticize you?
You realize you aren't just managing their dysfunction, you are managing your own terrifying fear of not being needed. But, and here's the big fear, what if they hate you for it? What if you set the boundary and the relationship just fractures?
That is where the 7th and final step comes in. Practicing radical honesty as an act of love.
Radical honesty.
Yes. And this doesn't mean being brutal or cruel. It means offering a truthful witness to their reality. It sounds like saying, I am going to stop paying your rent, or I am going to stop bailing you out of these crises, not because I don't care about you, precisely the opposite.
I'm stopping because I do care.
I am stopping because I love you too much to watch you destroy yourself, and I refuse to participate in it anymore. You align yourself with the reality of their soul, rather than the comfort of their ego.
That brings us to the haunting closing thought of this text, which really synthesizes this entire deep dive for me. It points out that everyday tragedies are so rarely caused by malicious villains.
Right.
They are almost always caused gently, lovingly, and with the absolute best of intentions. It's the mother who never, ever lets her child fail at anything.
Yes.
She ensures the child grows into a fragile adult completely unequipped for the world, or it's the partner who absorbs every single consequence of their spouse's bad choices, working 2 jobs to cover the debts, absorbing the emotional outbursts so the spouse never actually hits rock bottom.
The profound tragedy is that demons don't require evil people to feed them.
They don't.
They just require good, well-intentioned people who are absolutely terrified to stop giving. The most radical act of love you can offer another human being is sometimes to let the hunger remain.
Just hold the space.
Hold a steady, unmoving, compassionate space. Until that distorted pattern has absolutely no food left, the friction becomes unbearable, and they are finally forced into transformation.
Which leaves us with one final lingering question for you to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the specific person in your life right now that you are constantly rescuing, accommodating, or walking on eggshells around. Be honest with yourself. If you completely stopped fixing things for them tomorrow, what exactly are you afraid would happen to your own sense of identity?